Alright folks, welcome back to the Canary Wharf Sign Mystery, episode 1985. You've just woken up from a restless night's sleep and are ready for some chilling tales. But this one is going to have you sweating the sheets. It was the autumn of 1985 in London's financial district, where towering skyscrapers loomed like shadows on the darkened streets as they pierced through foggy evenings. The Canary Wharf area stood tall and proud, its shiny signs reflecting the night's cold shadows back to those who dared look up. Now, our story takes us into a dimly lit corner of this district, right next door to one of London's most notorious landmarks, the Tower of London. In front of it sat a sign that was both iconic and mysterious. It stood as a beacon for all the visitors flocking through the area. But tonight, something had gone terribly wrong with this once luminous marker. In the dead hours of night, when everyone else had gone to sleep, the sign began to flicker with an eerie glow. At first, just a few seconds of dimness here and there, but then it grew into sustained periods where only one side was illuminated, as if the lights were playing tricks on them. This wasn't normal, this went beyond mere malfunction. But that was nothing compared to what followed. As night deepened, the flicker transformed into full-blown dancing lights, pulsating in time with an unseen heartbeat. It's not just brightness but color too. It started from a pale blue and shifted through hues like indigo and vermilion before finally settling back to its usual gray. The most unsettling part though was that this light wasn't merely disturbing, it seemed intelligent enough, as if there was something behind these flickers. And then it happened, the sign's face changed. The normally dull letters began to dance with each pulsation, forming eerie shapes. It started slow and subtle, but before you could blink, it became more pronounced. A dark shadowy figure began to form against the ground beneath the sign. That was when we knew, this wasn't just an ordinary malfunction anymore. People whispered about seeing figures moving in the shadows, or perhaps even heard whispers coming from the very surface of the building itself, but no one had dared venture near enough to investigate. But the most chilling moment came a few days later. The dancing light suddenly dimmed completely and then lit back up with a violent surge of energy. When it turned on, its face was not what you'd expect. It showed a grotesque form, something twisted beyond recognition, as if a human had been mutilated in some horrific way. The public began to panic. People were calling the police and the media, trying to get answers about this mysterious sign that seemed to have an intelligence of its own, one that wasn't quite right. They reported strange smells, unexplained shadows, and even heard distant whispers as if someone was talking through the walls. By day 2, reports started flooding in from all over Canary Wharf. People were sharing their terrifying encounters with whatever or whoever was behind this sign. Some mentioned they could hear rhythmic knocking noises at odd hours, others said they saw strange figures darting between the shadows. But that's not all. A curious side effect of this spectacle began affecting the local economy. Stores and cafes started to see a drop in business, with people staying away from the area out of fear or simply because of those unsettling sightings. The signs were silent now, as if trying to hide their own secret. And so, as we sit here today and ponder what might have really happened back then, this was just the beginning. But it's clear, Canary Wharf sign wasn't a simple glitch but rather an eerie manifestation of something darker lurking beneath the surface. And that's not all folks, because what comes next is even more terrifying. But this was only the beginning. In part 2, we delve deeper into the enigma of Canary Wharf sign and witness accounts begin to emerge. The city detectives and paranormal researchers were quick to respond but found themselves facing a mystery that defied logic. Firstly, there was Jane Doe, who claimed she saw a figure lurking at the corner of Tower Street. She reported being approached by a shadowy entity, almost as if it knew her presence. Other witnesses corroborated her account. They all spoke of an unknown shape moving against the sign's face, with eyes that seemed to follow them. However, one inconsistency stood out. None of these sightings occurred at the exact time when the lights were active on the sign. The investigators theorized that perhaps the shadowy figures were not related to the flickering light phenomenon but rather a separate entity taking advantage of the confusion and darkness created by the malfunctioning sign. This brought them closer to another mystery. Why was this sign affected in particular, while other signs remained unharmed? They conducted interviews with local electricians who had worked on Canary Wharf during the 1980s. One technician shared a significant detail. He remembered that shortly before the phenomenon started, a new electrical cable was installed nearby. The technicians explained how this new cable would have created a powerful electromagnetic field affecting all electronics and lighting within its reach. This led them to speculate that perhaps Canary Wharf's sign had been targeted deliberately by whoever or whatever caused the anomaly. But with no direct evidence linking the malfunction directly to an individual or group, the investigation remained murky. They also noted discrepancies in the timing of these strange occurrences. For instance, a few weeks prior, a worker at one of the neighboring buildings reported hearing loud clicks coming from inside his office but couldn't locate their source. The contradictions grew even more baffling when they interviewed local security guards and shopkeepers who swore they had seen no activity whatsoever around Canary Wharf during those times. These inconsistencies started to feel like a labyrinth, each piece revealing just enough to leave one in the dark about the bigger picture. As they sifted through these clues, investigators found an anomaly that would have otherwise slipped past scrutiny. A maintenance worker's logbook entry noted strange occurrences just before and after the start of the light malfunction. It detailed instances where electronic equipment started exhibiting erratic behavior, lights flickering randomly, computers shutting down mid-operation, and even alarms sounding inexplicably. This evidence forced investigators to reconsider their theories. Perhaps this sign hadn't simply malfunctioned, it had been deliberately targeted with a tool that disrupted nearby electronics, creating a perfect storm of disturbances leading up to the light phenomena observed. However, every lead seemed to point to multiple hands being involved. There was no single identifiable culprit. What they did find were patterns, a series of coincidences and coincidental disruptions suggesting an orchestrated event behind closed doors, but obscured by layers of confusion and cover-up attempts. As investigators delved further into the logbooks and interviewed more witnesses, discrepancies in dates and times began to surface like puzzle pieces slowly aligning. Each piece provided another angle that seemed to confirm a deliberate sabotage of some kind, yet no single witness could offer concrete evidence or a definitive timeline. One theory proposed was an inside job. Someone within Canary Wharf complex had been deliberately sabotaging systems as part of a larger plot. But when they checked financial records and accessed surveillance footage for the period, all indications pointed to clean operations without any clear sabotage activities. This led them deeper into another mystery. If not sabotage, then what could have caused such widespread disruption? As investigators continued their investigation, they uncovered an old theory that began with a less sinister but no less chilling explanation. Perhaps Canary Wharf's sign was being targeted as part of some sort of experiment or occult ritual. The old-school theories had long been dismissed as mere folklore. Yet, these investigators found themselves revisiting this possibility. They discovered unexplained readings from electromagnetic field detectors at the site which fluctuated with unexpected patterns just before and during the incident. This provided a glimmer of truth, an event occurring within Canary Wharf's boundaries that seemed more natural or organic than man-made. What investigators discovered next would shake even the most skeptical minds. They uncovered encrypted communications between individuals who worked for different entities within the complex, ranging from private security, building maintenance companies to financial sector workers. These conversations hinted at a covert program where experiments were conducted on Canary Wharf systems and infrastructure using advanced technology beyond conventional surveillance. These revelations forced investigators to re-evaluate their previous theories once again. They realized that what they were witnessing was not just an isolated incident or anomaly but part of a wider, systematic operation designed to test the resilience of various components within this high-tech hub. In essence, Canary Wharf's sign mystery had morphed into something darker, more insidious than initially thought. What lay beneath its surface was far from ordinary. It suggested a clandestine experiment conducted not by an individual or group but by entities using the complex as a laboratory to explore uncharted territory of technology and human-machine interactions. What started as mere flickering lights had now evolved into something much larger, a covert, possibly illegal, operation that pushed boundaries and explored ethical limits. This revelation left the investigators bewildered yet determined to uncover more facts. For what they found next would force them to confront not only the nature of this anomaly but also the shadows lurking within Canary Wharf's complex itself. What had seemed like an isolated incident was now part of a larger, potentially sinister ecosystem hidden beneath the surface of modern urban hubs. The future held many unknowns as they continued their investigation, driven by the realization that what lay at stake went far beyond just deciphering a single mystery. It was about understanding the darker realities concealed within our technological advances and whether humanity could control or withstand forces beyond its comprehension. And as the shadows deepened around them, they knew this journey of discovery would be fraught with challenges but also essential for uncovering truths that could reshape how we live in these rapidly evolving urban landscapes. As the investigation deepened, a chilling new piece of evidence surfaced, a document detailing covert experiments conducted on Canary Wharf's electronic systems. The document's existence was initially dismissed as yet another conspiracy theory or forgotten artifact from the archives. However, as investigators delved deeper into these documents, they found discrepancies in dates and personnel mentioned, indications that something was off. The most unsettling piece of evidence came to light during a review of security camera footage. It showed what appeared to be a series of individuals moving around the perimeter of Canary Wharf at night, seemingly conducting covert operations without detection. The images were grainy and shadows obscured their identities, but there was no doubt that they were present and interacting with various systems within the complex. As investigators watched the recordings repeatedly, one sequence stood out like a specter among ghosts. In this footage, an individual could be seen activating and deactivating circuit breakers in a way that seemed completely random yet purposeful. This person moved swiftly, their movements precise but unsettlingly practiced. The most chilling detail was when they witnessed someone disconnecting the backup power supply to the sign itself. It wasn't just any system, it was Canary Wharf's lifeline, the very thing keeping the entire complex operational. The investigator who documented this in his notes described a sense of dread as he watched, knowing that if something had gone wrong with that connection. Suddenly, the footage cut off at a critical moment. Investigators searched for more records but found nothing, no logs, no acknowledgements from anyone involved. They began to suspect that this segment might have been deliberately wiped from the system. Meanwhile, they stumbled upon another piece of evidence that seemed unrelated but was crucial in piecing together the puzzle: letters and documents mentioning a shadowy figure or entity known as the Architect. These writings were vague yet chillingly specific, hinting at someone orchestrating these experiments with an almost godlike presence guiding them. The description described actions like perfect synchronization between different systems, actions that defied logic and common sense. One of the documents revealed a diagram detailing how various systems within Canary Wharf could be interconnected in ways previously unknown or even illegal under existing regulations. It was a blueprint for chaos, where a single point failure could cascade through multiple layers of security, creating a domino effect leading to catastrophic failures across different sectors. And then they found something that no one was prepared for. The investigators discovered what appeared to be an ancient artifact buried deep within the complex's foundations, literally underfoot. The object was metallic in appearance and highly reflective, almost like polished metal. Upon closer examination, it bore strange symbols etched into its surface, a language of symbols understood by very few people on Earth. These symbols corresponded directly with the Architect's writings. They were inscribed in such a way that they seemed to be guiding or programming other systems within the complex. The artifact had multiple layers, each layer contained instructions for different functions, seemingly from the time before modern technology took root and control over our infrastructure shifted into the hands of corporations. As investigators studied the device, a new theory emerged. It was not just Canary Wharf that was under attack, it was part of an even larger system designed to maintain balance across various dimensions. The Architect's role appeared crucial, like a puppet master controlling strings from unseen realms. This discovery made everything they had uncovered so far pale in comparison. The artifact's presence raised more questions than answers, but one thing became clear: Canary Wharf wasn't just an isolated incident, it was part of something much larger, a system designed for chaos and control that humans were only beginning to understand or even recognize. With the artifact's discovery came a profound sense of dread. The realization that these experiments were not isolated incidents but parts of a deliberate, possibly centuries-long plan underscored the gravity of their findings. What they had uncovered now seemed less like an anomaly and more like the tip of the iceberg, hinting at much darker forces operating in plain sight. The investigators knew then that what lay ahead would challenge even the most resilient minds. They were about to face not just the shadows lurking beneath Canary Wharf's sign but something far deeper and sinister, forces manipulating systems from unseen dimensions, testing humanity's limits with every experiment conducted within these walls. In their relentless pursuit of the truth, the investigators began to dismantle Canary Wharf's official explanation piece by piece. The sign's mysterious flickering light had been chalked up to a malfunctioning transformer and some strange interference in the electrical grid caused by construction workers nearby. They settled on this as the official account without any real evidence or explanation that could stand up under scrutiny. However, every time they delved deeper, contradictions started appearing in their narrative. The timing of the issues seemed off, occasionally coinciding with specific days or even hours during the day when construction was supposed to be minimal. But there were other times when it happened when no one should have been interfering with the system at all. The official explanation also failed to address why certain systems within the complex began behaving unpredictably after the initial incident. They pointed to a surge in energy usage and voltage fluctuations, but this didn't explain everything that had occurred. Systems like security cameras, elevators, even air conditioning units started malfunctioning without any apparent cause or external interference. As investigators dug further into the documents left by the covert experiments, they uncovered a series of anomalies that couldn't be explained away with simple failures or malfunctions. One document detailed how specific circuits were intentionally disrupted to induce cascading failure across multiple systems, a clear sign that someone was orchestrating chaos deliberately. The investigation revealed that Canary Wharf security had been compromised from within. Security footage showed what appeared to be insiders tampering with systems and bypassing alarms, allowing covert experiments to occur without detection. The official narrative conveniently ignored these details, sweeping them under the rug as mere human error or a misunderstanding of normal operations. But the most unsettling evidence came when they found an encrypted message within one of the documents. It detailed how Canary Wharf had been part of an experimental program designed to test and exploit vulnerabilities in urban infrastructure controlled by corporations and government agencies alike. The architects behind these experiments were clear: they aimed to create a system where failure could be managed but chaos was inevitable. The official explanation's reliance on human error or simple malfunctions served as a smokescreen, obscuring the truth. Canary Wharf had been used as an unwitting laboratory for testing advanced technologies and techniques designed for control and manipulation. This revelation rocked the investigators to their core. No longer could they dismiss what they saw as mere coincidence or mundane issues. But the official explanation also failed to account for why systems were synchronized in ways that defied conventional understanding. They seemed to operate under a collective mind, or at least some form of advanced algorithmic control, that was able to predict and manipulate events across different layers of the complex's structure. The investigators had glimpsed something sinister, a shadowy entity or group with godlike powers, orchestrating experiments from unseen realms. This entity appeared to have been feeding information into Canary Wharf systems, creating a feedback loop where every failure fueled the next step in their grand design. The official narrative refused to acknowledge this higher-level control, leaving only fragmented pieces of evidence and unexplained anomalies. And yet, there were whispers among those who knew too much, whispers that hinted at even darker truths. They spoke of forces beyond human comprehension, of dimensions warped by time itself. These whispers circulated in hushed tones around clandestine gatherings, but few dared to listen closely for fear it might turn out to be nothing more than fanciful conjecture. But the truth, as it turned out, was far worse than any theory. The investigators found themselves staring at a wall-up image from security footage that shook them to their core. It captured a man's face, blurry and distorted, but unmistakably human, yet his eyes were hollow, devoid of any sign of life or recognition. His mouth hung open in an eternal scream, as if he was struggling against some invisible force. The moment lingered long after the footage ended. The investigators couldn't shake off the image from their minds. It was clear now, they weren't dealing with a malfunctioning system or a simple glitch. They were staring into the faces of beings that defied understanding, beings born from chaos and twisted technology. Their eyes grew wider as they began to piece together the horrifying truth behind the Canary Wharf Sign Mystery Light episode 1985. The man in the footage wasn't just any human, he was a test subject, an experiment gone terribly wrong. He had been ensnared by forces beyond their comprehension, reduced to a mere puppet by those orchestrating the chaos. It dawned on them then, the dark entities weren't some distant force but rather they were within Canary Wharf's walls all along. The experiments were more complex than anyone could have imagined, each corner of the building had been infiltrated and compromised from the inside, creating a labyrinthine web of control designed to subvert human existence. The investigators felt a wave of dread wash over them. They realized that their findings pointed not just towards a system of internal corruption but towards an alien invasion of sorts. The man's face in the footage was but one piece of evidence, they had been fighting against something far more formidable than they ever could have anticipated. It became clear now that every corner of Canary Wharf, from the electrical grid to security systems, had been manipulated to suit their purpose. The flickering light, the malfunctioning circuits, and even those eerie whispers, everything pointed towards a broader conspiracy of beings born from these very experiments. The investigators knew then, with utter certainty, that they were not alone in this fight. Their adversaries weren't just rogue entities but an entire network designed to exploit urban infrastructure for malevolent purposes. They had been victims of their own creation and now faced the terrifying reality of a shadowy hierarchy manipulating the fabric of modern life. But the most disturbing revelation came when they uncovered documents detailing a complete record of Canary Wharf's clandestine experiments. It was staggering, the list of subjects, each one a unique experiment in suffering. Some were mere guinea pigs pushed to the brink, others subjected to mind-bending conditions designed solely to test human limits. What no one realized until much later was the most chilling part of all: these beings weren't just random participants but an army of control. They were bred, trained, and conditioned as tools for a greater purpose, their very existence justified by their servitude in these experiments. The dread that gripped them then became something darker still. They realized they may have unwittingly played into the very hands that would continue to torment and exploit the innocent. It was too late now, the darkness had already seeped through Canary Wharf's walls, poisoning every corner of what had once been a beacon of modern progress. The investigators were left in a state of despair. They knew their job wasn't just about uncovering the truth but understanding how to protect against such horrors. The shadows within Canary Wharf were now only one step away from manifesting into reality again, and they couldn't be sure who or what would rise next. In that moment, the true horror of what had transpired at Canary Wharf struck home, something far beyond any technical malfunction or human error. It was a tale of technology's dark potential, where progress could easily devolve into malevolent forces. The investigators were not just uncovering the truth but also bearing witness to an unimaginable nightmare that seemed all too real. As they continued their investigation, the weight of their discovery weighed heavily on them. They knew what no one should have to face: humanity's own creation had taken a dark turn, and now it was fighting for survival against forces unseen and unexplainable. The investigators stood in the shadow of Canary Wharf's towering structures, their faces gaunt from long nights and endless scrutiny. They had pieced together fragments of a nightmare too terrible to fathom, a labyrinth of darkness within the fabric of modern infrastructure. Each corner of the building was now seen through new eyes, windows that looked out into the world instead reflected the insidious tendrils creeping into every system. The light from the sign, once a beacon of hope and prosperity, had become a gateway to an unknown realm where technology and malice colluded to create a living nightmare. They realized then, the darkness was not just confined to Canary Wharf but radiated outward like shadows spreading across the city. Every corner of urban life now bore its mark, every security system, every network, every piece of infrastructure that once supported human civilization now teetered on the brink of succumbing to a force beyond comprehension. The most chilling part of all remained hidden in their findings: a document buried deep within an archive, detailing the true scope and scale of what had transpired. The investigators uncovered records of countless experiments designed to push human limits to the absolute edge, creating beings born from suffering and twisted technology. These entities were not merely the result of a single experiment gone wrong but a carefully orchestrated network of control, breeding and conditioning them into tools for an unseen hierarchy. Each one subjected to unimaginable horrors became another cog in the machine, each whisper or flicker part of a larger plan that had long been in place.